Thank you for your patience, everyone. We are live.
Good evening. I'm David Kaplan, the chair of the ATC Board of Directors. I'm going to go ahead and call the April meeting to order. I am here at the DASH facility, which is very exciting because I haven't been here in 13 months and got to see some of the changes to the office environment that were made in order to facilitate safe return to work by our employees. And it's nice to be here and to have seen some faces of some of our folks I've only seen on Zoom. So also have faster internet here, so I'm very excited about that as well. I welcome all of you and hope that you're doing well. We've got a very full agenda tonight. I'll go ahead and ask the secretary to go ahead and call the roll of the board members.
Chairman Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chairman Kleist.
Here.
Miss Bailey.
Here.
Mr. Bennett.
Present.
Mr. Chambers. Miss Collins.
Here.
Mr. Greaves.
Here.
Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Capsis.
Here.
Miss Orr. Miss Thomas.
Here.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Christopher Zeman. I'm sitting in for Ms. Orr.
Correct, yes. Okay, we're missing Mr. Chambers and Miss Orr.
Right. Thank you, Madam Secretary. First order of business tonight is to hear public testimony from on our transit development program and our service changes for the upcoming year. We have some speakers who registered in advance, and then we'll go over a process for those joining us tonight who want to speak and didn't pre-register. We're very interested in hearing your testimony, but in order for everyone to be able to respond to the most up-to-date and current information, we're going to have staff do a very, an overview of the changes that are proposed and some of the feedback that we've already received from the public through outreach meetings and that we've received through email and other means. Board members, I'll ask if you have questions, clarifying questions on Martin's presentation, please go ahead and ask them, but let's hold any discussion on the substantive parts of the presentation until after we've heard from members of the public. I'll go ahead and turn this over to Martin.
Well, just a moment.
Oh, we have to play our
COVID-19 pandemic emergency. Yes. This meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2A3, the Continuity of Government Ordinance adopted by the City Council on June 20th, 2020, or Section 4-0.01G in House Bill 29 and House Bill 30, enacted by the 2020 Virginia General Assembly, Virginia Acts of Assembly, Chapter 1283 and 1289, to undertake essential business. All the members of the board and staff are participating from remote locations through a Zoom meeting. This meeting is being held electronically unless a determination is made that it is safe enough to be held in person at the Alexandria Transit Company, Boardroom 3000 Business Center Drive, Alexandria, Virginia. Electronic access will be provided in either event. The meeting can be accessed by the public via Zoom and Facebook. Public comments may be made if participating via Zoom. The Zoom registration link is available on the DASH website, and requests for public comment can be made using the Q&A or chat feature. This meeting is being recorded.
Mr. Chairman, as you mentioned, I'll welcome Martin Barna to run through the TDP here. If you'll just pause for a moment while I give him control of the presentation.
And I can go ahead and lead off. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public. As Chairman Kaplan has mentioned, tonight we're having our virtual public hearing for the FY22 Transit Development Plan. This is an annual process that we go through to set the proposals for our following fiscal year. It's very important every year because we look for public feedback for that process before we make any final decisions and look to incorporate that feedback as much as we can. It's even more important this year because we have the new DASH network, which is going to be launching in September, which is the first phase of our Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. Let me see if I've got control here, Josh. One moment, please.
See your cursor moving. So you should.
Okay. Maybe a delay, so it'll probably take it in a second. But so I have a brief presentation this evening. I want to be very keep my words to a minimum, because the point of tonight is to hear from the members of the community about what your input and thoughts are on the proposed plan. I'll be going through just a very brief version of the new Dash network and what we're proposing, some of the benefits and some of the potential costs, and then talking about what our outreach we've done and what we've heard from the public. Right here, you've got our website, dashbus.com/new network, which is a great comprehensive resource for all things new Dash network. So I recommend anyone who hasn't checked that out to go there. And there are versions of the website available in Amharic and Spanish with translated materials for those that are interested in that. So as I mentioned, we're launching the new Dash network on September 5th this year, which is less than 5 months away. The first phase of our ATV, our Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. It represents a reduced version of our 2022 ATV plan, which was adopted by the board back in 2019. We are hoping to implement the full version of our 2022 ATV plan the following fiscal year in FY23, but we're able to implement this reduced version because we've got a cost neutral subsidy from the city based on our current services budget request. And then we're also receiving some additional funding from 395 Commuter Choice Grant Program. So that is allowing us to realize some of the benefits of the 2022 ATV plan, including some of the frequent all-day routes, which I will be talking about a little bit more. One thing to highlight here is that there are some proposed changes for Metrobus. You can see the routes there, 7A, 7F, 25B, and 28A. They have conducted their own outreach process, and you can get more information on that at the WMATA website. And those changes are scheduled to coincide with our September 5th start date as well. And Josh, I'm having a little trouble. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's the proposed new Dash network. You can see that there's a number of changes to the existing routes that we're proposing. First and foremost, the route numbers are changing. This was not an arbitrary decision. It was something that was very intentional. It's something that we don't take lightly. We know that's a big change for a lot of our riders. The intent is that the new numbering system will provide additional information to customers about how frequently the routes run, whether they run on weekends or not, or if they're just peak only. So just as a cliff note, if you see a line that's 30 through 36, that's our core network that runs 7 days a week. Whereas if you see a 102, 103, 104, those are weekday only or peak only. It also removes some confusing aspects of our current numbering system with the AT prefixes, which was somewhat difficult for people that were not native English speakers, those with disabilities, and some people that weren't really familiar with Alexandria. So hopefully a little bit more user-friendly numbering system. You can see the colors on this map show that there's a frequent all-day network in red. Those routes are operating every 15 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. One of the questions that we got through outreach is, what do we mean by all day? What standard is that? To put it into a minimum level, it's basically talking about from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays, and then 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. on weekends. That is the absolute minimum. We're guaranteeing 15-minute service during those periods on these routes. Depending on where you're at on these routes, which route you're trying to use and which direction you're going, it's more than likely going to be earlier in the morning and later in the evening than that, but that's the minimum that we're guaranteeing, just for reference. The other colors are signifying routes that run less frequently, those in blue, and then also our peak only routes in green. And there's a lot of changes. I'm not going to go into them in great detail right now unless they're asked specifically about, but you can see the map here. And again, dashbus.com/new network has all the information there. There we go. Some of the benefits, just overall, as I mentioned, that red network is frequent all-day bus service. It's extremely useful. We're putting those useful routes in places where lots and lots of people can use them. So we're expecting that ridership will increase from that. You can see some of the statistics on access to those red frequent all-day routes here. The existing column, existing services today versus our September network, the FY22 new dash network, and then the 2030 long-term vision. So you can see between now and this September, we're expecting that 2/3 of our residents will have access to the frequent all-day bus service. And then you can see even higher numbers for low-income and minority communities. And then you can see when we get to the 2030 ATV plan, even higher. So very big benefits there. We are maintaining bus service for 99.5% of existing boardings. And I can talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And then just overall, we're expecting higher ridership, which will have a lot of benefits for the community as a whole in terms of reduced traffic congestion, better environmental outcomes, better climate outcomes, and then a stronger economy. So those are the benefits. I do want to include a couple slides here that talk about some of the areas that may be negatively affected by the proposed changes. And we may, we've heard from a few of these areas over the last month, but I do want to highlight them here. Just for your reference, the colors on these maps are a little bit different. The red areas are intended to show areas that are currently served by Dash, but will not be served by Dash in the future and will not have a Metro bus route as an alternative in the immediate vicinity. You can see that Reading and Rayborn in the West End is an example of this. Likewise, a small segment of Braddock Road behind Bradley Shopping Center. The important thing to note with many of these is that they are immediately adjacent to frequent all-day routes. So for example, Reading and Rayborn, they would no longer have service on those streets, but they would have, they'd be a very short walk away from the Line 35 service, which runs every 10 minutes all day on weekdays, every 15 on weekends. So hopefully for those that are able to make that additional block or two walk, they would be able to use that really frequent service. The yellow areas are areas that are currently served by Dash, would not be served by Dash in September under the new network, but there are Metro bus alternatives. One area is North Van Dorn Street here. That's currently served by AT5. Metro Bus is proposing to realign their 7A route, which would serve that corridor. So there'd be a change in the buses serving that. I should note that the alignment is a little bit different though. So some current AT5 riders would be able to use the 7A, but they would also have to transfer most likely to get to some of the places they currently go. The orange areas are additional notes that I wanted to highlight. You can see Seminary Road and Janney's Lane. We're retaining weekday service on there. We're maintaining the service there. However, weekend service would be discontinued due to low ridership. So I do want to highlight that. And then the AT34 loop, as we recommended in the ATV plan, that's the off-peak route that would be proposed for discontinuation in September. The areas along Russell Road, Cameron Mills, and then obviously parts of Park Fairfax, Northridge would lose off-peak service because of that. However, to be clear, the AT3 and AT4 peak services would be maintained as they are currently today, although they'll be called the 103 and the 104 respectively. So flash forward to Old Town, you can see some similar colors. The red areas are the areas, again, where Dash would no longer be serving. So you've got some parts in Old Town North, Powhatan, Bashford in this area that would no longer have the AT2 there. And then Duke Street in Old Town as well would no longer have the AT5. So both of those areas would be a couple blocks away from the Old Town Circulator, which would run very frequently, less than 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. So hopefully they'd be able to use that, but understanding there would be an impact for individuals living in those areas. And we have heard from a couple of them as well. And then the yellow areas, again, are just areas where Dash currently operates. The new network would not have Dash service in those areas like Pendleton, South Washington, and Hunting Point, but there are Metro bus routes that could be used for those individuals. Okay, so just a quick summary of the outreach we've done. I'm not going to read through this entire slide. If you look at page 24 of your packet, there's a summary, a couple pages summarizing all the outreach that we've done. But you can see we've done a number of virtual meetings. Here's an example of one of the flyers that we posted on a number of stops to alert riders to potential service reductions. We've also done a lot of outreach to community organizations. Given the pandemic, it's been a little more challenging than usual to get people's attention. So we've had to really focus on using stakeholder groups and community organizations to help spread the word. So that's been one way that we've done that. Some key stats to highlight. As I mentioned, we had virtual community meetings. We did 4 different meetings, each one focused on a different part of the community. Thank you to the board members that participated in those meetings. We had good turnout of a total of 75 participants and attendees on Facebook Live and Zoom across those 4 meetings. And a lot of almost 90 questions and comments, and then a lot of online engagement as well. You can see some additional stats there in terms of the emails that we received. And these numbers are as of last week. They've since gone up in the last few days. We're continuing to receive emails and letters. And you can see that we've received a couple letters of support. We've actually received 2 more in the last couple of days. I'll be including all of these items again in the May packet for next month. So as I mentioned, we had the 4 community meetings. We also did some polling during those meetings to increase the amount of engagement. We asked a lot of questions throughout the meetings, but at the end we asked we provided 2 statements and asked the degree to which they agreed or disagreed. You can see the first statement was the new network is better for my personal mobility needs. And the second one was the new network is better for the city of Alexandria as a whole. You can see the green shows strongly agree, and the blue shows disagree and strongly disagree. So for the first statement about their personal needs, we had about 56% of attendees agreed that the new network would be better. And then for the city as a whole, 75% said that the new network would be better compared to about 20% and about 6% respectively for the disagrees. The most common reasons for the agrees was that they either benefited personally from the new network, or they liked the increase in the frequent all-day service, particularly with how it served low-income and minority communities. For the disagrees, they most commonly, or almost all of them, were negatively, or they were personally affected by one of the proposed changes. So they were having a negative personal effect. Then just a couple more bullet points. Just like I said, we received largely positive feedback overall on the new network and what it would mean for the community as a whole, with frequent all-day service, and also especially for minority low-income communities in terms of equity of transit access. We got some comments about free or reduced fares for low-income riders, and in support of those. Comments from Seminary and Janney's in Central Alexandria about keeping the AT2. They were thankful for that, and support from Park Place residents about the 36B alignment, which we changed a couple months back. In terms of negative or concerns or issues, we did hear a couple people were opposed to or had some concerns about the North Van Dorn corridor, which is one of the things that I pointed out on the map there, that they currently ride the AT5. They would now have to ride the Metro Bus 7A, and they may have to make some transfers to get to places like Bradley Shopping Center. So that was a concern we heard. There was some concern about the AT34 loop and its discontinuation, and then some questions about line 35 and if it should connect to Shirlington, and line 36 if it should connect to the Braddock Road Metro. So my last slide here is just a calendar that shows the timeline. We started our annual TDP and budget process back in the fall. Last month, we presented the draft version of the Transit Development Plan, the service changes, and the budget to the board. We've been doing our outreach for the last month, and we're continuing to do it. And then we've got our hearing tonight and right here. And then we've got our potential consideration for adoption in May, on May 12th at the next board meeting. However, I do want to note that we do have a little bit of flexibility built in the schedule, such that if we did need to push the timeline back by 1 month and have the board consider for approval in June, that is possible. So I want to keep that in mind as well. And then, of course, we've got our big launch date in September of the new Dash, and we'll have the resumption of trolley service then. That concludes my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. So we're going to go ahead and move into the public hearing. We are very anxious to hear all of the feedback, and appreciate everybody who's taken some time to do this, to be part of this process. So a slide has just come up that summarizes some of the processes for the hearing. The staff is clarifying that all board members must have their video on while we are deliberating topics, taking public comment, and members with muted video are considered away from the meeting and cannot participate during deliberations during such time. Comments that are made during the hearing are recorded and made part of the public record, and also any testimony that is submitted in written form as well. And we have the email address for DASH, which is dashbus@alexandriava.gov. We are continuing, because we're not acting on feedback on, we're not taking final action on the TDP until the May meeting and potentially the June meeting. We will be able to continue accepting comment through, is it this Friday, the deadline to submit comment, Josh or Martin?
That's correct.
So you still have a couple of days if you want to react to kind of what you've heard tonight and get your comments, and they'll still be shared with us and included in the record. So we now have a slide up that shows how we're going to conduct this hearing over Zoom. Those wishing to speak will either have pre-registered or may do so by indicating with the raise hand function that they want to be recognized. We'll take all our pre-registered speakers first, and then we have staff who are monitoring the Zoom to see the raised hand function, and then we'll acknowledge those speakers in order. And just for ease, because I don't have access to that list and I'm trying to listen to testimony, staff have agreed to actually call the speakers in order. So you'll hear our Director of Marketing, Whitney Code, calling these speakers. All speakers have 3 minutes to speak, and so there will be this hourglass that will show you as your time goes by. And once the 3 minutes are up, you will be asked to wrap up. And again, you can revise and extend your remarks through written submissions. So with that, I think we are ready for our first speaker. So Whitney, I'm going to turn this over to you to recognize the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 pre-registered speakers this evening. The first speaker is Bob Gronenberg.
Thank you, Whitney, but I did not register to speak this evening. I've already submitted my comments in advance.
And thank you, Bob. And we did see that your comments, we did have them in our written packet. So we've received them.
Thank you.
Apologies, Bob. Next, we have Kevin Brady.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for receiving public comment tonight. I'm Kevin Brady. I'm a Dash user and a homeowner in Alexandria for about a decade now. And I'm also a member of the group Grassroots Alexandria, though others from the group will be speaking more than I a little bit later. I strongly support free fares for low-income riders, as well as frequent all-day service Route 30 in the Duke Street corridor. And for that to begin, hopefully in the year 22. And, I really appreciate the plan that you all have conducted so far, as well as the community outreach. And I'll close by saying, as a higher income resident, I've never had to worry about either access to transportation or affording it. And so I gladly pull or even an increased fare to, subsidize the no fares for lower income folks. I think it's really important for, for our fellow residents who are struggling and are really trying to get to work on a daily basis. Every dollar and every minute, that much more for them to have there would really have a big impact on their lives. And folks like myself can easily, take on a greater share of the funds on that level. So thank you very much again. And
Thank you, Mr. Brady. And I neglected to mention at the outset that the free fares proposal, which is not included in our TDP, certainly as something that would have to be amended and could be included in our TDP based on council action. We'll be talking about that later, but certainly we welcome comments on that at this time.
Mr. Chairman, next we have Mary Harris.
Hello, this is Mary Harris. I'm the president of Notice, the Old Town North Civic Association. I live at 501 Slater's Lane, area code 22314. And we have a Notice Board of Directors met on Monday night. And along with our other civic associations in the Old Town North area, we drafted a letter which we submitted, I believe, yesterday or today, endorsing in particular the Old Town North circulator route, which we're really excited about. As you know, our neighborhood is growing very quickly. We now have a very well-developed retail corridor on Montgomery Street in North St. Asaph. Having a circulator that's operating at the frequency that you're proposing will be a real boon to our neighborhood and to the employees who work in this area. So we want to thank you for that and endorse it. We're also pleased with the new 34 line continues to provide connectivity for our Old Town North residents who live north of Montgomery Street, particularly residents on Bashford and Slater's Lane. This area is also densifying very quickly, not just our neighborhood, but Northeast and Potomac Greens. We're expecting to add almost 1,000 new residents within the next year. So we do endorse some of the service improvements that you have offered, and I would like to thank you very much and yield back my time.
Thank you, Mary.
Next, we have Michael Deliso.
Good evening, Chairman Kaplan and the board. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. So I'm Michael Deliso. I represent Park Place Condominium up on 2500 North Van Dorn Street. First, apologies for the toddler in the background. First off, we wanted to really thank you for incorporating us into the plan. We served on the ATV stakeholder working group, and we've engaged ATC and City Council to restore all-day service to Van Dorn Street. So we appreciate the split routing of the 36. We think that the 36B is going to be a great addition to our transit service here. We wanted to reaffirm just the prior positions that we've established in front of ATC. We have testimony from November 13, 2019, asserting our association position on transit as supported by a community survey of several dozen folk in the building. The key thing just that I wanted to relay from that was one, that we support the Alexandria transit vision. We support the restoration of all-day service and think it's a great routing. And also, we really value the commuter services that we have through the 22F through WMATA, which get us to Metro. So we value single seat service to Metro. We value both all day and our commuter services. And we really want to thank ATC for working with us. And we think that the ATV is really going to serve the neighborhood well, and the new network will serve us well. So thank you very much. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Michael.
Our final pre-registered speaker for this evening is Jim Durham. So I encourage any of the attendees who would like to also provide public comment to please raise your hand at this time.
Good evening, Chairman Kaplan, other members of the Alexandria Transit Company Board. My name is Jim Durham, an Alexandria resident. I'm speaking as a member of Grassroots Alexandria, which is a volunteer resident-led organization that advocates for social and racial equity and climate initiatives. And before I go to the rest of my remarks, I want to thank you for your service as volunteers on the board, because you make impactful decisions for tens of thousands of people. And thank you for your careful and thoughtful deliberations. 3 comments. The first is that the new Dash network would dramatically increase the percentage of low-income residents who are served by frequent all-day service by 250%. We really applaud that, and by 320% for residents of color. Grassroots Alexandria strongly supports this anti-poverty, pro-environment update to the Dash network. Thank you. A growing number of jurisdictions in the United States recognize the benefits of providing free or reduced fares for low-income residents outweigh the costs. Providing free fare for low-income residents can be easily implemented. A recent city study that was included as your package showed that it could be done as a low-cost initial or pilot initiative. And we suggest including that in your plan going forward. Grassroots Alexandria supports this initiative, as does the Partnership for Healthier Alexandria. The partnership has specifically included free fares for low-income residents as a public health and anti-poverty initiative in the soon-to-be adopted Community Health Improvement Plan. And my third point, we'd ask you to ask council to provide funding in fiscal year 22 to accelerate the implementation of all-day frequent service on the Duke Street corridor, route AT30, rather than in fiscal year 23 and 24. As you know, and as I've provided reference in my written remarks, the most cost-effective, proven approach to increase ridership is to improve service and reliability. Route 30 is the highest ranked, most cost-effective route to do that in the plan. And also adding all-day service to Route 30 is another equity and health initiative because it would make useful service available to more than 6,000 low-income residents, more than 24,000 minority residents. In summary, I recommend the board vote to immediately inform City Council that the two most important needs for additional funding are free fares for low-income residents and accelerating all-day frequent service on Duke Street corridor. Thank you very much again for your service.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, from the attendees this evening, we have Edith Wilson.
Ms. Wilson?
Edith Wilson has permission to speak, and I've asked her to unmute her microphone.
It looks like Edith may be having some technical difficulties. So I do want to confirm oh, no, I think the other person that raised their hand is no longer logged into the meeting. So if Edith isn't able to speak, then that concludes the public comment section.
Okay. Could somebody reach out to her on chat and just see if she still wants to offer comments?
Yes, I believe she was in contact with Caitlin. So I know she does want to provide comment. I think she's just having some microphone issues.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? Let's go on and approve the minutes, and then I'll ask if we've resolved it, and we'll hear from her then. Well, actually, we're going to move next into public comments from anything that's non-TDP related, because we have a standing public comment opportunity at the meeting. So I guess I would ask, I doubt we have any further speakers, but Whitney, had anyone signed up to a general public comment?
We have covered all of the pre-registered public comment speakers.
Okay. We're going to vote on the TDP, as I said, in either next month or in June, and that some of that may depend on direction that we get from City Council in the final budget. Our May meeting is after City Council will have adopted the budget, but if there are any remaining issues that we have to take care of that will require a postponement to June, that's why Martin had indicated that we have that flexibility built in. Does anybody on the board have any, I know we've heard this presentation a lot, but does anyone have any comments or questions of staff before we move on?
Hello.
Oh, it looks like Ms. Wilson is unmuted, so.
You had a question that you just asked. Do you want to continue with that question to the board, or is it all right if I proceed?
We're having a lot of trouble. There's a lot of choppiness on your connection. It's
Is that better?
oh, that's much better. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, never mind. Let me just make good use of your time, and thank you for the enormous courtesy of helping sort that. I am the president of the Shirlington Civic Association, and we met on Monday night and we discussed the changes. I'm also was a 20-year resident of Alexandria and an admirer of the Dash bus system. I am authorized in what I'm about to say to speak on behalf of some of our really important stakeholders in this whole area, including stakeholders, I believe, for Alexandria residents, and that is for WETA, for Signature Theater, for the Carlisle Restaurant, for UDR, the owner of the Delancey, for the Shirlington Village condominium. And I've consulted with all of them as well as with our members. We just want to ask the board to think twice about not stopping at the Shirlington bus terminal right across from Alexandria with dash 35. We think this would be a disservice to the whole area. It would, in an area without metro, it would force people into cars. We have lots of employees who need to come to Shirlington to work. We have patrons for all of your wonderful favorite eateries and institutions over here. And we need the best possible bus service. So please don't do that. And I think it's not just don't do that to us, please don't do that to Alexandria. Boundaries can be very artificial. And one of the things I've discovered living now in Shirlington is that when you're on the periphery, as Park Fairfax and that part of Alexandria is for us, or Shirlington is to you, you have to be very careful to maintain connections. We also would not like to see a change in service to the 7A and F without more discussion. We'll confirm these comments in writing by your Friday deadline. I'm grateful to Bob Gronenberg for his advice on this issue, and we associate ourselves with some of his more technical comments. And we thank you for your service. We really appreciate this chance to be heard.
Thank you, Edith. Martin, could I just ask you to respond and just help us understand the service that will exist to Shirlington once the this new network is implemented? We could get the map. If we could get the map back up.
Sure. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the proposed service to Shirlington would be very similar to what it is today. We have currently the only route that is serving Shirlington is the HB29. And actually, Josh, if you wouldn't mind going back to the full map, that might be a little easier to talk. There you go. So you can see that the HB29 is effectively replaced by the 36A and 36B. So we are maintaining that HB29 service along basically the same alignment with additional headways due to the 395 from your choice. So that 36A and B will actually be running every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. By comparison, the HB29 today only runs every 15 minutes during, every 20 minutes during peaks and every 30 minutes during all other times. So you're going from 15 peak to 15 all day, 7 days a week. So that route is significantly increasing due to the 395 Premier Choice program. The other route that we had discussed previously was the line 35, which was referenced. That's the route that goes along the West End, along Beauregard, and then comes to basically Mark Center, then up to Park Center, then jumps on 395 at King Street. Originally, we had planned for that route to also stop at Shirlington and to replace the 7A and F. However, there were some additional discussions with both WMATA and Arlington, and it was not possible for us to make that change with the line 35 to service Shirlington. So line 35 just goes to 395 northbound up to the Pentagon via King Street. It does need to go through the Shirlington Loop to get on the express lanes, but it does not actually go into Shirlington and serve the transit station due to some of those interjurisdictional issues that I just mentioned. And one final note, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Metrobus. That they have their proposals on their website, but I can tell you that the 7A and the 7A would be consolidated with the 7F, but the alignment in the Shirlington area would remain the same. So basically, from King Street north on the 7A, it would be identical to what they have right now. So no changes to the 7A. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I might just also add to what Martin is saying, and I appreciate how he explained it. You know, we have a lot of regional coordination challenges in this area. We have great friends all around us, and we appreciate the working relationship and have been at the table with them. And I know Martin and his team have worked very hard to do everything we can to make sure everyone is serviced to the maximum extent possible. I think there's also components here of limitations of space and usability of facilities. And ultimately, it's just important to understand that when we're dealing with stations that are in other counties, other jurisdictions, we respect and understand that there are difficulties in which they're navigating. And I think I would not be out of line to say that at any point now or in the future, should the opportunities present themselves to find ways for solutions working together, that our team would be happy to be at the table to try to figure out how to make that happen. So just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that from my perspective at a regional level as well.
So this is not that we don't have enough, we would require additional buses, or that the the timing on the routes wouldn't work with the Shirlington stop. It is really an issue of the capacity at the Shirlington Transit Center. Is that fair?
Martin, am I saying that correctly? I mean, please correct me if I am misspeaking here, but I certainly understand that there are components of that in this whole picture.
Yes, that's part of the issue. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that response. I will just ask if any of our other board members have questions or comments they want to make on the TDP or the testimony that we've heard tonight. Okay, hearing none, I've confirmed that there are no further public comment speakers for our general public comment, so we will go ahead and move on to the review and consideration of the March meeting minutes, which were included in your board packet. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes as submitted? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt them.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the minutes from the previous meeting as presented.
Moved by Steve.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
Second by Matt. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes stand approved. Chairman's report is just to thank all of you for two things. One is the phone conversations that we've had in the last few days, particularly as events have moved very quickly with City Council and the Free Fair. I really enjoyed getting to catch up with everybody and to really kind of drill down and get your thoughts. And I think that will help us when we get into the conversation on that shortly. And the other piece of it is just to note, and Martin mentioned this in his presentation, that we had great participation from our board in the meetings on the transit network that were done remotely through Zoom. This is something that's relatively new for us. Usually when board members show up, we staff runs this program as they did because they are the experts, but we had board members who were there and identified and showing our support and commitment to listening to the community and to for the work that is being done. And I think it's important for us to be visible so that folks in the community know who's making these decisions. So I know that Matt, Steve, Larry, Ajasha, Ian, and Hillary all participated in these sessions. So I want to thank you for doing that. And I hope that this will kind of be a model we can use going forward in how we do our outreach. That's all I have for the chair's report. T&ES report, Chris is here. Turn this over to him.
Hi, thank you very much. So the T&ES report, the commuter choice program, you all are very familiar with it. Just to give an update on the timelines and kind of steps moving forward, the public comment period is scheduled to open in mid-April and go through mid-May with the final approval by the NVTC Commission in June with funding starting in FY22. The Duke Street Transitway. I guess next slide. Yeah, there we go. The Duke Street Transitway, we have awarded the community engagement contract to Roadside Harwell and Neoniche Strategies. Again, this will be a revisioning exercise to re-examine the entire corridor with, again, a robust community engagement process. The planning and conceptual engineering will, we're looking to another team to start that, which will be starting in the fall, to bring it from a plan, to kind of translate the vision into actual conceptual engineering. It was so about 30% design. Then legislative updates. The main things to come out of that with regards to this group is that TRIP funding, the funding has been increased to $10 million statewide for fare-free pilots. So that may be of interest to us. And then there are many legislators who express support for electric vehicles, charging, just transportation electrification in general. Next slide. Oh, all right. I just talked about that. Next slide. Oh, one more. Yeah, so the Climate and Energy Action Plan. So basically, it's actually the Energy and Climate Action Plan, Climate Change Action Plan. So the Energy and Climate Change Task Force is giving feedback to staff on the analysis of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change vulnerabilities for several different sectors, including transportation. And the task force will also be supporting recommendations for additional actions to achieve specific climate change emissions reductions consistent with the Environmental Action Plan. And this may include identifying and evaluating funding, budget strategies, implementation steps, et cetera. So those are the main, those are my updates. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So at this time, I'll ask if any of our board members have updates from boards, commissions, and organizations that you're part of that you want to share for the betterment of the group. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's good to see you again. My report, I'm going to run through 4 different items here. Of these items, one of them is an action item for you this evening. So when we get to that item, I will be asking the chairman to administer any action the board wishes to take on that item.
Josh, just before you start, could we take 5B at the end? Just do the other 3 first. And
sure. Yep. So the first item here is related to our COVID-19 operational status and our response to the ongoing pandemic. As you alluded to, let me just make sure I don't have a slide here for this. Oops. Yeah, there we go. As you alluded to earlier, we have worked hard to prep the facility for the gradual return of workers, and we're excited to see faces again gradually coming back to our workspaces. With that said, we continue to operate under the guidance of the governor's office in regard to restricted capacities, as well as having certain areas of the facility closed off. We continue to work with the workforce, trying to gather information about vaccinations. We have seen an increase in the number of vaccination cards coming to our offices. However, we are continuing to find it is a little bit hard to sort out how many people have been fully vaccinated at this point. So again, that information is voluntary by the workforce, but we are discussing multiple avenues to make sure that we have as much information as possible, and we can potentially inform some of our decisions on the reopening of portions of the facility dependent upon the metrics that will eventually come from the governor's office regarding reopening. We continue to have a very low experience rate of cases in the workforce, with 2 having been identified since our last meeting, contact traced and not found to have been spread on the job or originating on the job. You can see our continued ridership hovering just around or below the 40% of our normal ridership pre-COVID. As we continue to see people moving around, traffic volume has increased, and we're hopeful to gradually see folks return to transit as time goes on. Per your instruction, Mr. Chairman, I'll skip the fare-free discussion till the end, but I will draw your attention then in the board packet, if you're following along. I believe this is actually pages 11, starting on page 11. I'm sorry, my numbers were a little bit off, depending on which document I was looking at, but between 11 and 14 of the board packet. This is the advertising policy. As a reminder, we are asking the board to consider adopting this policy in order for us to continue our progress towards implementing external advertising on dash buses. This is a part of our commitment in the budget process, as well as a priority that the board has expressed over the past couple of years to find a way to implement such a revenue source. I'm very confident in the policy and the work that staff have put into it, and would certainly open up any questions from the board and allow the chairman to administer consideration of that. And I see Mr. Harris has his hand up, Mr. Chairman, so I'll hand it back over to you for discussion.
Sure, Matt, I know you had indicated you had some questions for staff about this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Josh, I take it Lonnie helped draft this?
Yes, so this was drafted by Evan and the team here. And then it was a combination of efforts using regional policies and taking the best items from each of those. And then it was sent to Lonnie for review, and he provided feedback on that as well.
Okay, and just one slight question, and I'm not a tax lawyer, but limiting to 50C3 only and not including C4 or 5 could be a little too restrictive in that labor organizations with apprenticeship programs or agricultural programs like 4-H or something like that, under just limiting it to 50C3 would deprive that. So you may just want to double check with Lonnie. My sense is these things always get challenged by some group or another, and it's probably less of a legal issue than just a cost of defending it issue. So anyway, I appreciate the effort, and otherwise I'm all for it. I think it looks great.
I appreciate that feedback. I don't see Evan. If you are there, Evan, and you wanted to come off of mute, I know you worked very hard on this, and I didn't know if there's any additional background to that particular segment, or whether you're aware of any concerns of what Mr. Harris has brought up.
Yeah, certainly. First thing I would recognize Whitney Code drafted this really in looking at WMATA and other organizations in the area. With regard to the tax exemption, I believe some of the other agencies in the region limited it to 501c3 because those agencies are typically, they're held to a public support test and a public charitable purpose reason for exemption, whereas a lot of the other exemptions under 501c are more private membership organizations or special purpose. So that's where we're at, with the language. But I think, if the board felt that it was important to widen that a little bit, we could certainly do that.
And I'm not suggesting we widen it now. I just think if it's challenged, rather than, at that point, get some more legal advice specifically to other 501Cs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Could we pass this now and then have, have our council take a look at Matt's question and concern and then amend this very quickly as opposed to waiting until it's challenged? If we can get an answer in a month, as like an organization like 4-H to me seems like one that we would certainly want to, allow to advertise on our buses, but then I don't know if that broadens it too, if we're taking it then too far, if we add the other 501Cs back into this.
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly, I think we can certainly capture that and the board certainly can amend policies at any time. So that's certainly reasonable.
Anybody else comments on this?
Jim has his hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify, what Matt, was your concern specifically around the public service announcement section and sort of the limitations on 501c3 advertising, or was it broader than that?
It was definitely broader than that.
Okay. Because I guess I would know, I thought it was broader, at least in the 501c3. If I'm reading this correctly, and maybe staff could just clarify, I may be misunderstanding, that this is actually limiting even the 501c3 related public service announcements to only the bulleted categories. Is that right? Why is there kind of a, I'm just curious, like, why is there a checklist of categories, and how is that, I guess, how is that arrived by staff or by our attorney? I'll just note, just as like one example of what it seems slightly arbitrary to me, where for example, the environment is not on the list. So any public service announcement that's about recycling or protecting our natural resources wouldn't be permitted, I believe, by omission based on this definition. So I'm just curious. I'm sure there are, like, we could all come up with 5 more on this call as well. So I'm just curious as to why that limit. I mean, overall, I think, by the way, the policy looks totally straightforward and excellent, but this is a curious section to me.
I think probably the best answer to that is really we're just following precedent for the most part with the policy. I think with, some of those items, on the other hand, they're in section C, or 2C, there may be some prohibitions over things in those categories if they ended up being a public policy position over which there are differing opinions, in the community and things like that. But again, I think we're very open to revision, either in a month's time or at any time that the board wishes to do so, upon some further research of what would serve us best in this area.
And just jumping on what Jim said, I mean, even if you said, for example, or not limited to, but here are examples, I think that would make it a little broader and more vague. But in any event, I mean, you take the good with the bad, and the potential for bad could be terrible. So anyway, I'm for, as long as we understand, someday down the road it may be challenged, and we'll just change our policy then if need be. But I would definitely ask Lonnie to take a second look at this.
Sure, and Jim, we can certainly spend some more time with that. I think candidly, in full transparency, this is a totally new foreign thing to us. So we kind of, to Evan's point, really just followed the lead of sort of other regional things. So something that's omitted, I think as we navigate this, I hope that we'll have a really amicable relationship with our advertisers and that things will go very smoothly and whatnot. Being the realist side of me says, these things throughout the country have constantly been major sources of strife and challenge. And so I think our approach was pretty conservative, but I think certainly the way I would approach it is if someone came up to us and said, gee, why is this expressly prohibited? We looked at it and said, that doesn't seem like something that has reason to be prohibited. I think my take on it would be that I would come to you all and say, I think we should propose this amendment, essentially, if that approach would work for you. But if you had specific stuff you wanted to see incorporated, we certainly can talk about that too.
I guess, Josh, I appreciate that. I guess my view here, and interested in other board members, and I also think I know we have other things to talk about tonight, maybe are more urgent. Like Matt, I think for moving forward purposes, I would support a motion to approve as written, but I would ask that staff come back and maybe provide a bit more context on some of the limitations, and at least for my own, I mean, maybe it's not arbitrary, but it's certainly not limited to. I'm surprised that like the environment is one example is not there, and why. I'm just curious why not. But if maybe you could come back with recommendations on an explanation on how we might amend it, but otherwise I'm totally fine moving forward as is.
Just for the board's reference, I mean, I think we could certainly take a look at everything and receive feedback and propose some potential small adjustments even at the next meeting, which would likely be before our contract is even awarded, you know, to begin the advertising program.
Okay, so we have time, is what you're saying, built into this, and then I think, you know, we have some concerns. I think things that we need to hear more about, and you know, we're fortunate to have folks who have you know, some expertise that allow them to drill into some of the details here, and I think it's worth waiting. If that's the sense of the rest of the board. I see Matt nodding. All right, then we'll pull this.
Agreed.
Oh, Ian,
I just said agreed.
Oh, okay.
Let's move on to the next meeting.
All right, so we'll pull this until May, and if there's anything else that comes to mind, to reach out to Josh, so that way he can ensure that Lonnie includes that in his review, or staff talks further with other agencies that have used the same policy or this template to build on.
Certainly, we're happy to do it. I just want to pause for Evan and Whitney to make sure that they both understand the inquiries here, since they were spearheading this effort. All right, I got a thumbs up from Evan. I can't see Whitney, but I'll assume that we'll follow up with her and make sure that everything is in good shape. Okay. All right, well then I will move on to the other item before we talk about the first item on this slide, and that is just to let you all know that our first meeting of our Dash Rider Advisory Committee occurred earlier this month, and we were very pleased. I was very pleased with the group. Some of them may in fact be listening in. I know that Jim Durham spoke earlier, and he is one of the members of that group. Just for context, for our newer board members, this is something I've been working on for a while. The board has endorsed this this approach, and I've worked internally to make sure that we structured this group to be both an advocate for the rider and an advocate for Dash. So got a chance to meet with the group via Zoom. We had delayed because we were hopeful that we'd be able to come together following the pandemic. Of course, a year ago, we all thought, oh, it'll be a couple of weeks. But we got them together, had a good conversation via Zoom. Whitney is our staff liaison for that group. And they will be meeting on a somewhat regular basis, typically prior to the board meeting, and sort of functionally, just so the board kind of understands what you might expect, is that that group will be briefed in each meeting on departmental functions of Dash, special projects, things that are going on. The last meeting, or their first meeting, they heard about the new Dash network. I will participate as my schedule permits, but I am not leading that group, and I take a very stand back approach. I want that group to have the opportunity to really have organic discussion, talk about the priorities, talk about what's important. And we also welcome them to participate with Dash in representation of Dash at future events and future outreach to our riders. We see them as partners, and I'm just really excited at the enthusiasm they have and the work that Whitney has been putting into it as the liaison, and will continue to do. So as the opportunity permits, and as there are subject discussions that group talks about, they will certainly be able to submit written positions to me, and which I would of course share with the board as in your deliberation of items. And I also mentioned to them that I would welcome them to come as a part of my general manager's report, and also speak on items periodically in the course of their meetings. So again, a very great grateful to that group for their volunteering their time and looking forward to more things to come.
And Josh, I would just add, this came out of, I'm very proud. I mean, you have worked with this in Lynchburg, and we're wanting to bring this here, but the catalyst for this really was a commission that I also serve on, the Commission on Aging, where some of our members, you had come to speak and had several members had asked about whether we would do something around seniors and getting them involved, particularly around the new network. And so I'm so glad that this is finally come to fruition. We have some very enthusiastic members, and I also shared with Josh that I hope that that staff will feel free to call on us as board members to participate in some of their deliberations, to have open lines of dialogue with them anytime that they see fit to provide input directly to us, because we want them to know the board values this as well and considers this an important partnership that we want to nurture, and feel that they all are seeing this as a very worthwhile use of their time and energy. So thank you so much for getting this off the ground. We look forward to hearing more about it.
Certainly, thank you for your support.
All right, so we're going to move into the fare free, and there was a second budget memo as well on the King Street trolley. Josh, why don't you address the King Street trolley one first, and then I'll make some remarks about the fare free and some discussions we've had, and then I'll turn it over back to you to kind of clarify and elaborate on that.
Certainly, happy to. So just again, a correction, apologies, as I was putting together the PowerPoint, I was looking at a document that the pages are slightly different number, but this item begins in your packet on page 8, and it continues through page 10. There's a lot of information provided in the packet. The packet, for those watching the meeting, is publicly posted on our website. If you have any issues, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to get you that information. There were two memos two questions as you mentioned, and I'll let you discuss question number 26, which was related to fare elimination on Dash. The other question that was submitted during the budget process as a part of the add delete inquiries was regarding the King Street trolley and what it would take to reinstate that earlier. It appears that has not been discussed much further with us. That's not to say that it won't come forth in the add delete submissions, but I believe we're probably past that point anyway, as far as submitting them officially. So what remains in discussion and out there with council is the prospective elimination of Dash fares. So Mr. Chairman, for your request, I'll turn it back over to you, and then happy to discuss further with the group.
Thanks. And so I had over the last few days the opportunity to talk to each of you about this proposal and understanding. So just by background, the mayor put in a budget memo asking about what it would take to make Dash, in terms of a financial commitment, to make Dash fare free for all. And that's the budget memo 26 that staff with the city and with Dash were involved in providing a response to that. The council will begin the add delete process shortly. Actually, this Saturday, they will begin discussing the adds and deletes they want to add to contribute to the budget. And this has gotten a lot of support. The mayor has indicated that he has majority support among the council to make Dash fare free for all starting in September. And it may well be unanimous. There are no council members who have expressed opposition to that particular ad. This is helped along by some state money under the TRIPS program that Chris talked about earlier. However, the city will have a financial commitment they will have to come up with, and a growing financial commitment, because as Dash recovers in terms of ridership, and as Dash gets new riders because of the impact of the ATV. This was not limited just to low income. It was decided, it was one of the options, but the city has decided to the mayor has decided to go and propose an ad that would add money back for to cover all fare free on Dash. There were options for discounted as well as free for low income. And the city did a low income fare study where they looked at options for fare free or discounted fares for low income that would include both Dash and WMATA, but this only pertains to Dash. So as we have the conversations, I've heard from some of you feel very strongly that philosophically that this is the right thing to do and is very important, even over other sort of unfunded portions of the ATV. There are segments that we wanted to do in FY22, particularly the Duke Street corridor. We heard some public testimony on that we aren't able to fund. And some folks said that we do this first because this is transformative. Others had some concerns, a lot of it being on the fiscal side, and some concerns also about just applying this to everybody and the loss of, say, transit subsidies, as well as fair revenue from those who can afford it. There are some implementation challenges that we talked about as well. So we sort of start with the idea of we expect the city is going to implement this policy, and sort of they are going to really make this transformative. How can we have input that will help to express some of our concerns, as well as to get the city aware and acknowledge the enormous financial commitment that they need to continue to make the Dash so that we are providing the service that people need. So I'm going to suggest that we send a letter to the city council that addresses 3 points. And I've discussed, those of you guys spoke with early, we were still sort of developing these. So some of you haven't heard these. Most of you have sort of heard these talking points already. But they are to suggest that this be labeled a pilot. So instead of saying Dash will be fare free forevermore, the city only does a 1-year operating budget, but nonetheless, the language might be that this is going to be something that is going to be permanent. Let's set a implementation of 12 to 24 months that allows us to work with the city and with council and other stakeholders to figure out what are metrics that say that this program has been successful. What are we looking for? And so we can go to the community and then evaluate the continued and growing impact of this. So see if the city will label this as a pilot. Now, staff will have to respond to if it's done as a pilot, if there are any of the offsets that are being used to pay for this, if we have challenges with using some of those. So I know Josh will respond to that later. The other is to spell out what the service enhancements are that are needed in FY23 and 24. Duke Street, Eisenhower Valley, and potentially some of the commuter service that goes up to the Pentagon, which we have asked to have some increases for. So what are those costs? And to say to council, we stand very much behind that that is a big driver of Dash service, and that those should not be foregone in order to do fare free. As well as understanding some of the capital impacts, because although our capital budget is separate from our operating subsidy, if this continues to grow and grow and grow and council's under some financial pressure, there could be motivation to look at some of our capital projects, say around things like technology improvements, and pull money from that in order to fund this growing operational subsidy for Dash. And so to be very firm that we believe the projects in our CIP are necessary for an efficient and effective Dash. The third point would be about community outreach, to express to council that that's really a place where we could have added value on this. We spent 2.5 years drawing lines on the network. We had public testimony tonight, as we've been talking about this every meeting since 2018, about how to do this and what our values are. And yet this is a very consequential decision being made outside of that process. And so what we want to do is to say to council, look, we understand that you have the prerogative to do this, but if this is going to be a pilot, and if we have opportunities, let's look at how we can do engagement to find out from the community, is this something that's truly valued? Is it something that's effective? Or do they want to see council putting additional money into other things that improve the service and the experience of riding Dash? And just to remind council that really that's something that we do very well and we're proud of as an organization. And we wanted that to happen here, and we want it to happen as we have an opportunity to reevaluate this. So those are my thoughts. I'll ask staff if there's anything they want to add or clarify, certainly to talk about the pilot aspect of this, and then let's open it up for board discussion.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you've just said makes a lot of sense to me and the team, and certainly something we're happy to work together with the board on. A couple of things I would just highlight, as there has been some discussion and there were some public comments about low-income fare programs and some alternative approaches to this. And I think one of the things, and there is the study, the executive summary of the study has been included in the board packet as an attachment, again, available to those who are watching the presentation on our website, but also to the board members who received it last week. And that is that there are administrative challenges and costs associated with fair programs that are unique to specific subsets of the population. And those can become quite complex and quite difficult to administer. And while fundamentally they make a lot of sense as to how they benefit the community, and we agree with them, there are some distinct advantages to a fully fare free approach because of how much resources and challenges it can present in those qualification processes, whether they're done in-house or in coordination with other city programs, other city departments, WMATA, et cetera. So that's certainly a component there. And from a staff perspective, it certainly has a lot more, there's a lot less, challenges associated with going fare free. To speak to your point about capital projects and priority of those, I think very important that we continue to have those on the books. A couple of things I would just note that was explained also in the packet, but also for anyone who might be watching who hasn't had a chance to see that, is that the potential cost of this has been identified as 1.47 million. And when we presented in the council work session in the group within the city that we're a part of, we showed a higher number. And the higher number is because there are other elements that aren't reflected in that figure. One of them being the significant amount of revenue that was anticipated with the I-395 projects. I think it would be important to pause for a moment and state that there's a lot of unknowns about filling that gap. And I'll be transparent with the board. That's something that at the time when we responded to the request, the question wasn't immediately in front of us. And it wasn't something that we included in the response as part of current services fair revenue numbers. So those grants go into place next year and we still look very favorable. I don't know where we are on the award process of that, but Evan or Martin could speak directly to that. But ultimately, that number, we still have to have that revenue associated with those grants. The grant can't just be increased by $670,000 to cover going fare free. So we worked hard with the city to identify potential sources for that. And one of the sources is a fare box, essentially a fare box rehab program that is coming from some capital funds. And we sought the opportunity to reprogram some of those funds to another city project. It has to be transportation because they're RSTP funds. And Evan or Chris or Martin, someone could help me with what RSTP means. Please jump in, interrupt me.
Regional Surface Transportation Program. It's a federal money that gets allocated to localities for a variety of transportation projects via NVTA.
Thank you. Thank you, Evan. There are so many acronyms in transportation, it's hard to keep up with them. So the potential is there for the city, could be there for the city to reallocate those funds. Again, you can't use capital funds to pay for fares. Simply put, there's nothing you can do with capital funds to reallocate it for fares. However, the city is paying for something out of their general funds and wants to reallocate that to DASH, they can do so and potentially substitute some of those funds. The other potential there is the NVTA 30% funds and the increases, prospective increases associated with that allocation. Again, the other transparency I'll have here is that although that 1.47 number is certain on the city council side, there are a lot of uncertainties about that 670,000 number, as well as some additional sort of anecdotal costs that are associated with fare collection be it fare box maintenance, the Smart Trip, cost of the Smart Trip program, and other costs like such as armored car service and these things that go along with fare box fare collection. So there are a lot of moving parts here, and some things that that my team and I are prepared to do and will ensure is done in an effective way internally in regards to managing costs, reallocating resources that might be freed up from collecting fares. But it is not a simple flip the switch, here's a dollar amount, we're done, move on. To your point, I think that this is a conversation that's going to have to continue for a long time. And the last thing I'll say before I yield the floor back, because I welcome as much conversation and questions as there are on this, is that Dash does not typically operate on fares of just shy of 1.5 million. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Evan, but we're over 4 million pre-COVID in fare collection, correct?
Just under 4 million, yes.
Just under 4 million. So that's a big gap. And so I really appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your efforts in having your one-on-one conversations with your colleagues to help make sure that the board supports a position that emphasizes the fact that over time, there are certainly challenges here. There are great benefits to this, and it's being done all over Virginia and all over the country. There are countless articles going on of systems that are going through the very same conversation. And I think it has a great opportunity to support the economic recovery of Alexandria and our country as a whole. But to your point, there are some real challenges to be navigated in the future that we're aware of. So, last item I'll say before I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, is that the TRIP program, which is explained, it is a bullet on page 8 of the packet. The TRIP program created by House Bill 1414 has a pretty substantial amount of money in it this year, with a lesser amount in future years. But I've had plenty of conversations with colleagues at the state about this and understanding this program. We're waiting on the guidance to come out. We cannot apply for it yet, but we certainly will when it comes out, anticipated to come out in June, with it to be considered for awards by fall. We're certainly in a great position to access a large chunk of that money. We've been very proactive with our study that has been ongoing and the other work that we've done here in the city to prepare for something like this. But that is also an unknown. It's not known exactly how much we would be able to get out of that program. Just know that we're having those conversations, that we feel very favorable and strong in our applications for that. But that would be something that we would be bringing back to you as a board in the fall to help you understand what it's looking like and where things are going with that program. So I will stop talking and turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, to identify if any of your colleagues would like to speak on this item.
Let's open this up to the group.
Yeah, I had a question. I'm sorry I didn't ask this yesterday, David. Oh, I should have put my digital hand up too.
You're fine, Linda. You're right.
But I was just wondering if is there any discussion at WMATA? Because I think the one I was just looking through the estimates from the study that's at the back of the packet, and not everybody transfers to WMATA, but people who are transferring to WMATA, it's limited benefit because they can only get around Alexandria. So I was just wondering if that's on topic at all with WMATA.
It certainly seems to be something that has been expressed by multiple officials from WMATA as far as concerns. And certainly I think it is recognized that the potential, if WMATA was trying to go fare free, the potential is for the bill to get substantial. to localities. And it is a much bigger lift than it is for Dash as far as the amount of revenue that they rely on from Farebox. It's there. I don't know the extent of conversations about that, but certainly we're happy to continue to follow that and let you know what we hear. It seems that this is something that if it's done, Alexandria would be leading the region in doing it first. And others are waiting to see how this plays out locally in our city before they make decisions. I will mention though that Maryland, Evan or Martin or Whitney, somebody, I can't remember which system it is in Maryland, has been talking about this. I've seen it in some news articles as well, that there are systems there. But I'll certainly try to let you know who that is.
I think it's right on Montgomery County.
Yes, that sounds right. That sounds right.
Steve had his hand up, but let me just comment on that. We talked, some of us, as we got into some of the specifics of this proposal, it is problematic. I think if Alexandria goes alone, it's necessary because, we can't bring the other regional partners with us, but it actually hurts people who primarily travel by bus, because if you transfer from one bus to another, you get the free advantage on the Dash bus, but when you board the WMATA bus or the Fairfax Connector bus, you're just, instead of getting a transfer, you're just going to pay the full fare on that second bus. And that's a shame, because the city is giving up all that revenue in the name of helping people to make transit more affordable. But for folks who are primarily bus riders, and a lot of those are in the lower income levels because they're trying to stay off Metro Rail as a higher price point, they're actually going to end up paying the same that they would pay now. And the other thing I wonder too is if there is a lot of movement on Alexandria bus routes where we have some parallel service, places like Duke and Mount Vernon Avenue, do we end up seeing WMATA ridership falling because people are making a choice to take the free bus? And what that begins to do to our WMATA subsidies, the city could end up actually paying for that dearly because of supporting the Dash fare free, but then also seeing some increasing costs for the WMATA service. So I'll let staff respond to that, and then Steve has his hand up. We'll have him go next. If you want to, if staff wants to say anything about that.
I mean, I think you said it pretty well, Evan. I would call again because, he gets the numbers and how all these things flow also within the city. But
I'm not in a great position to comment on how it would impact the WMATA subsidy. There are city staff who could do that better than I, and Martin actually might. It's really unknowable because there's so many variables that go into how the WMATA subsidy is calculated on an annual basis, impacting ridership, the amount of service on the street. So I think all the points you've raised are incredibly relevant and, would be part of the ongoing discussion should council choose to go in this direction.
So Steve, and then Larry has his hand up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You actually raised one of the questions that I had with regard to the number of low-income riders that will actually benefit from this, and I would characterize that as the rider that only uses the Dash system that would benefit from a fare-free environment. And I'm not sure what that type of that ridership base looks like. Would staff have an estimate as to what that might be as far as the actual numbers of people who only use the Dash system on a daily basis?
I can answer that one. Unfortunately, we don't have that level of data. Thank you for the question. We don't have that level of data because we haven't done a ridership survey where we measure income and the different routes that the riders use since it's been a number of years. So we don't have recent data on that. We do, through the study we've done for COG, that's included in the packet, we do have some numbers on kind of overall low income residents in Alexandria. If you use the standard of 200% of the federal poverty threshold, there's about 33,000 residents in Alexandria that meet that threshold. If you look at just the SNAP threshold, which is a common program that's used for low-income individuals, it's about 130% federal poverty threshold. That's about 18,000 residents, but only 8,000 of those residents actually use the SNAP benefits. So if we did look at doing a program, we'd probably use the same eligibility requirements of a SNAP type program. So you'd be looking at 10 to 18,000 eligible residents that would meet that low income requirement. And obviously that would leave out a number of folks that don't necessarily meet that requirement, but are still, not, they're still relatively low income. So that's a consideration that you might miss some of those individuals if you just focused on only low income residents that meet that 130% SNAP definition.
Thank you, Martin. And that's like to say, I support the concept of providing a financial support to our low-income riders. This is essentially, like many municipalities deal with, a sales tax. It's a regressive type of a tax. It adversely impacts the lower income groups, and we can provide some relief for our ridership base, at least with regard to the dash fare, to the extent that we can. But one of the points I'd like to share with everyone here is that there's a fairly substantial amount of revenue that we would be losing, and that would be once our federal workforce re-engages in normal operation. Those in the Washington metro area receive a travel stipend, and that is a source of revenue that I think is very valuable. And it would be unfortunate to be able to lose that to help offset our operating expenses. But the other question I have is, as I'm reading through the material, it looks like this is a fiscal 22 budget initiative and not necessarily a policy change. Did I understand that to be correct?
Correct. So, so far, it simply came in as a part of the normal process as a question of what would it cost to be fare free. So theoretically, what I interpret would happen in a situation like this is that money would be allocated to Dash for this purpose, and then it would be on this board to then modify the policy of the fare, since this board under our bylaws is the entity that establishes fares.
And I know with the presentation and the information shared, it looks like there's going to be, at least for the next year or two, some sources of revenue to help support this fare-free initiative. My concern here is that if it is not going to be treated on a policy level on the part of the city council, in the same way that essential services are provided by the city, police, fire services, education, trash removal, calling Dash an essential service, then I would hope that the city council actually develop a formal policy so that as the timeline goes on with new council members of council, and they start seeing these rather substantial numbers coming in for supplements to operate Dash, that there's some formal document that memorializes what this initiative is, if it is going to be just more than a fiscal 22 a budget change, and possibly into fiscal 23. But I think it's important that everyone is mindful that while the funds are available now, they're not going to be there forever, or it's unlikely they'll be there forever. And we still have the responsibility of providing quality, safe service. And it would be unfortunate that we need to reduce operating standards just because the subsidies are decreasing. That was a good idea in 2021, which may be troublesome to continue as the years go on. But that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. So I've got Larry, followed by Chris, followed by Brandy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I think I'll echo what I've heard in terms of the philosophical support for making sure that Alexandrians can use the bus and do it in an affordable way. That said, I also have concerns around the potential for doing damage to the system over time. I wonder, this isn't a new idea. It's gaining momentum across the country. We're not the first. We may be leading this region in going fare free, but we wouldn't be the first to do this. Are we talking with any other small to mid-sized cities about how they navigated going fare-free and where new funding streams came from to keep their systems healthy?
I can jump in as well. Thank you, Board Member Chambers. We through our study, we did a number of case studies and literature reviews, and so we did look at I think it was at least 6 to 7 other cities, mostly small and mid-sized cities that have enacted similar fare-free programs. So we have kind of studied those cities and seen the results of their programs. So we do have some background on what they've done and the effect in terms of ridership and budgetary.
Chris?
Hi, thank you very much. So, so I think it's definitely good to ask all these questions. You know, maybe a pilot program is the best way to ensure that we can get answers to them. You know, I think I'm on the same page with most of you and being, you know, very interested in the ATV and the expansion and, you know, what's already kind of implementing what's already been approved. I think though that the truth is that we really don't know how transit will look post-COVID. You know, I think a lot of our assumptions might be kind of pre-COVID and that a lot of the Dash network will be used for commuting, which obviously we know is going to change dramatically. You know, I mean, even the ATV kind of wants us to look at transit, not just for commuting, but as a way to meet most daily needs. So hopefully this will mean a lot more shorter trips. You know, so you know, we maybe the idea that, you know, losing fare revenue to transfers that might not be as big a deal as it is now, as it normally would be. I mean, maybe it would be. I don't know. Which is why I think that, yeah, kind of going for a pilot would be the best way, you know, that we can kind of get these answers to kind of ensure that there's some type of analysis. I mean, I think the big, you know, I think that I'm kind of coming at it from a perspective like, you know, as Chairman Kaplan said, you know, this is most likely going to go through anyway. So what are the kind of, how can we think about it in terms of, you know, getting the answers to a lot of our questions, you know, not just fare revenue, but kind of, you know, what are our priorities? You know, implementation of the ATV network, I think, is a really big one. You know, a couple of things that, you know, come to mind, you know, in terms of this is that, you know, this, you know, the good thing about, you know, going fare free, let's say for FY22 or FY23, is that it can be reversible, you know, or it is reversible. You know, we can go back to collecting fares at a later date. You know, if we find that, you know, it doesn't really provide the benefit that we see. You know, and then in terms of, you know, assisting low income riders, you know, I don't know how clearly it comes out in the low income fare policy report, but or the executive summary, but, you know, as Josh mentioned, the administrative side of implementing something like this, of qualifying and then qualifying passengers and then coming, you know, and then getting them to actually sign up for it. It's very cumbersome and very kind of labor intensive. And, you know, in other cities where they've done this, they found that it's very hard to actually reach the intended audiences. You know, I think Boston showed like, showed only like a 30 or 40% of low income residents were actually using this fare program. So, I mean, I think, you know, like I said, I think that there's a lot of, it's good to be, you know, questioning of this. You know, this is a brand new thing that, you know, and it could have major impacts, but going from the assumption that this is most likely to go through, I think, you know, how can we make it the most productive conversation, you know, to also promote the ATV at the same time?
That's a good point. I mean, we all want to protect funding, you know, as it comes to the ATV, and that is a concern that I have going forward. It's just the story, particularly for newer council members who will come on after this decision is made. Just and Josh put this in our packet, just the growth of our subsidy already since FY19, and now we could look at an additional $5 million. It's, you know,
on the one hand, for me, having come to this in an environment where transit was being cut, and we were begging for scraps during the 08-09 economic crisis because there just wasn't the support there. Programs like this didn't, like trips didn't exist, and the federal money for transit wasn't coming during that recession either to prop up losses because people weren't commuting. But to look and see we even have the flexibility to do this on the one hand is just amazing to me, but on the other hand, it does. One wonders, is there a ceiling that we're going to reach eventually, and what that means for the other things that we value, like service, which is so key to making this a great service. But appreciate the comments and the perspective. So Ian, and then Brandy, and then Ian.
Thank you, Chairman, for recognizing me. I'd like to echo Chris's comments about the importance of supporting this because it's going to go forward anyway, but also supporting this option versus the others, because this one does capture more people. As Martin also pointed out, I thought that was really key. That part stood out for me the most in the executive summary, that a lot of families and households that could benefit from a free fare would be excluded if we only focused on folks who are current SNAP recipients, because a lot of families are working families and don't qualify for that lower income threshold, and they would be left out if we only focus on low income households. And also, I was really surprised that the administrative costs are so high for a low income only program. So that wouldn't be in the best interest of us as well to implement a program that would actually cost more and help fewer people. Additionally, I think that it's important that we think about ways that this could possibly be a pilot, just so we can work out the kinks and make sure that things are working the way that we expected. And primarily my question is regarding the subsidy changes that will be required if we go forward with free fare. I think it's a terrific program. I support it, but I would like Josh to talk to us about the graphic on page 9 in the packet. Are we to assume that since council asked us how much would it cost, that they're in a position to increase their subsidy to make sure that that there will be no impacts to service going forward if we do implement this great program going forward?
Sure. I mean, I could just briefly speak to that. And I think, the reality is there's very little that we can, for lack of a better word, play with in regards to our funds, right? When we're asked to reduce our budget by a percentage or whatnot, we have a limited number of things we can look at. One of those things historically has been the ability to change fares, to increase them. And I think you bring up a really good point, Ms. Collins, which is this, when you don't have fare revenue to adjust, the only revenue that remains at that point for us right now is charters and advertising revenue that we're going to start looking at, right? So, and those we don't really have a whole lot of control of. We're hopeful that they're productive, but again, it can depend on what's going on within the community and what the need is. So it does become the potential that when we're looking at reductions in that type of a situation where, let's say, fares haven't been in place in Dash for a long time, and it's not a consideration to bring them back, it is service, and it is looking at how to adjust the service profile to meet the fiscal constraints that we have.
And Ian was next.
Thank you, Chairman. We have compelling thoughts on either direction, and what I wanted to add was some confidence in the support that the city provides. As I'm in a point position to see the transfers and the financial support for the general operating subsidies, supporting the King Street trolley, and looking at fiscal year 22, as Steve advocated, we we do have considerable revenues coming in. It is not a policy decision that we are making for beyond 22 at this point. There is still an opportunity to speak with council in looking to advance the subsidies that they are providing they are about to approve. And as Brandy mentioned in page 9, this is a clear indication of the support that the city does provide towards DASH. So in summary, I just wanted to instill that confidence that the city strongly supports DASH's projects.
Thanks, Ian. I think Matt had his hand up.
Yes, thanks, David. Yeah, I think we shouldn't really second guess the city's commitment. And in fact, we are all supporters of public transit, not because of what our subsidy is or how much fares represent our operating budget, but the totality of fewer cars on the road. What's the cost to the city of not having to maintain the roads as much? Having folks who may not think about going out to dinner be able to go out to dinner because transportation costs are not an obstacle. That has a trickling down effect throughout the economy, our local economy. And we can't forget the environmental impact of having more folks out of their cars. I think it's a win-win as long as the city is the one behind this. We aren't here to make money. We're here to provide a service for all folks, and especially lower income folks who have more options because the fares will be free. So I support it 100%.
All right. Anybody else? Jim.
Just quickly want to echo, I think what I'm hearing, and David, just going back to your initial sort of proposal or proposed letter, support it wholeheartedly. I would maybe only, just be very clear particularly clear on the ATV side and ensure that council supports the full ATV and maintains that support through this process. And with that, I don't know, David, what action you're looking for to get support for the letter, whether you require a motion. But I would ask you whether you need one or whether you just want a sense of the room. If you want a motion, I'm happy to make one.
I think a motion would be helpful. So that way we're just clear in the minutes as to the action we've authorized staff to. It will help them in drafting the letter to know what we support.
So in response, I'd like to make a motion that we support the letter that David has proposed sending to council, that he outlined at the beginning of this discussion with the 3 key points, and that David, pause. When do you want to send that by? I think to make it relevant, it probably has to be sent relatively quickly.
I think by close of business Friday.
Okay. With a deadline of sending it by close of business on Friday.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. And I would actually just ask Jim as maker of the motion, if just in hearing some of the feedback that we've gotten, if you'd accept a friendly amendment, which is to also include our support for programs that improve equity and that are targeted to low income in terms of bringing people on transit, but with the understanding that there are, some things that we want to work out as we go through the pilot stage. And I want to make sure, because I've heard a lot of support for what this does. And I don't want that to be lost, because especially City Council is ultimately trying to get more people on transit. And I don't want them to think that we're adversarial or against this, the idea of what this stands for and what it could do.
I would accept that friendly amendment. Would you like me to restate or just accept that?
If our board secretary feels that she has a good sense of what we've said, let's ask Beth if she's.
I think I'm good on this. Thank you.
All right, Chris has his hand up.
Hi, thanks. So could you just go over again really quickly the 3 points that you made? Was it suggesting that this be labeled as a pilot, spell out the enhancements for FY23 and FY24, and ensure that no capital projects are sacrificed? Or was it community outreach?
Well, so yeah, the capital impacts was really part of the service enhancements. It was basically maintaining other DASH programs, and then the community outreach was the third, and also just acknowledging that that didn't happen here, and we do feel that was a missed opportunity as this program was, was put together to have that engagement with the community, and that we will do that once in setting goals and then going out and getting feedback on how it's worked.
Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, sweet. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? I'm not hearing any, so I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. This was a really good discussion. All right, Evan, we're going to move on to your reports on finance.
Absolutely. Good evening again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'll move pretty quickly through this simply because a lot of it's already been covered. But in terms of where we are right now, we remain on track to finish fiscal 21 within our budget. We are working, as always, very closely with the city's finance department to process the CARES Act transfers, which are making us whole in fiscal 21. That will happen in the near future. And our I-395 commuter choice grant reimbursements, which are supporting such a significant part of our operating budget this year and the next two, as those reimbursements happen, they affect the financials very substantially. And just the timing of it is why we're in a deficit in February, and we'll have a large surplus in March because two transfers were booked in March. So you'll see that next month. I do want to highlight fare collection, as you know, resumed on March 15th. We have received our Smart Trip revenue numbers for March, and they are above our projection slightly. So that's very good to know at least we're on track in terms of the ridership we have now to meet our revenue projections going forward through the end of June. We do project use of roughly 4.5 million of the CARES Act transit funds in fiscal 21. That's through June 30th. And of course, revenue is an offset to the CARES. If we make more, we use less CARES and vice versa. That's where we are for fiscal 21. I'll pause if there are any questions for the current year or the current reports. All right, moving on. Just for everyone's awareness, we've included again in the packet all the details regarding the fiscal 22 budget that we presented last month. There are no material changes here. Just very quickly moving through these slides. As you know, it funds ATC at a current services level, and the manager's budget proposed a September return to the King Street trolley. We're very thankful to be in this position given the overall status of the economy and the pandemic. But the key impacts on the next couple of slides are, first of all, that we're going to launch the new Dash network in September, and that we're going to have 3 of those frequent all-day routes, one of which is really being funded within current services as a result of eliminating inefficiencies and redundancies in the network. And, as Martin discussed, the shifting of service to areas where people are going to use it the most. And 2 of those routes, are 35 and 36, will be funded by I-395 commuter choice. Just going ahead to the next slide.
Sorry, Evan, before you go a little further, if I could jump in.
Of course.
A point of order for the board to understand that if what we just discussed is changed on the city side through the add delete process, then we'll present a modified version of our budget to reflect that when you adopt it. And that, Evan, correct me if I'm wrong, we will know the outcome of their or the managers or will we know the final budget May 5th?
Yes.
So that's in advance of our May board meeting, at which point we will then adjust these numbers, correct, Evan, for members to see how the budget shakes out in its final form. So even though we call this the general manager's final proposed budget, it's sort of final with that caveat. And I don't know, Chairman, you have a member with their hand up. I don't know if we can recognize her.
Ask Brandy if she wanted to be recognized.
Thank you. I have a question about the CARES Act funds. What happens if we don't spend it all? Can we just save it for a rainy day?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So our fiscal 22 budget actually assumes we will use the remainder of what we don't use in fiscal 21, carry forward into fiscal 22, 1.6 million of it. So we need it for both fiscal years. And then what the manager proposed in his budget was using the second relief bill that happened in December, CRISA, 1.3 million of that in fiscal 22 for DASH as well. So we'll use all of the CARES either this fiscal year or the next one.
And I'm sorry, Evan, just I see you're still talking about the budget, but I did have a question. Josh, you and I talked about this very early on in the Fair Free discussion, which was about whether, because we did not propose eliminating fares, whether we're going to be, whether it would be appropriate to hold an additional public hearing and basically advertise that for, once council has basically said they're making funds available to do this. I didn't know if you'd, again, we talked about this a few weeks ago, so I don't know if you had any further thoughts on whether you thought that would be necessary given our board bylaws and procedures.
So my take on that is that it's not necessary to put the process back out, but what we should do is at the May meeting, when the budget has been revised, would be to present that, and I would recommend that further comment be accepted at the May meeting. And then the board can choose to defer action from the May meeting to the June meeting. Or if the comment that's received is supportive, there's no further content or discussion, that you could move to adopt your budget and TDP in May as revised. Again, with the option of the board deferring that to June. However, it is necessary for the budget and TDP to be fully adopted as final by the June meeting. So we're at a bit of an advantage here in the sense that, and kudos to my team members here who have worked hard to keep this stuff, on schedule, if not slightly ahead of schedule. So we do have that extra month buffer if we should need it. And I'm happy to, make that happen at the May meeting accordingly.
All right, just the final points that I would highlight for you for the fiscal 22 proposed budget is, again, what the city chose to do this year is to not increase the general fund contribution to DASH, but the amount of our annual increase in the budget is being funded by that second relief bill that was passed in around New Year's, CRISA, to the tune of about $1.3 million. If you look over on the expenditure side of the budget, what it's funding is mostly the regular compensation increases that are mandated by our CBA and that we kind of carry forward proportionally through the organization among our non-represented staff. And then on the revenue, going back to revenue, we are, as you know, accepting advertising for the first time. We are in the middle of the procurement process to obtain a contractor for that. And we think that contract award will happen in May. To have that contractor in place, to have the program up and running and generating revenue in July to begin the fiscal year. And of course, when we created this budget, there was no sense of fare free on the horizon. And so the passenger revenue that we've estimated is about 50% of pre-COVID levels, which we think, and still think is probably a conservative projection. Should fares be kept into fiscal 22? Should they be eliminated, as you've discussed, our subsidy would increase by 1.4 million. We would save some fare collection costs, and we would be seeking other sources of revenue to cover the fare revenue assumed by our I-395 commuter choice grants. That's $670,000, and we'd be working with the city to fill that gap, as was discussed earlier, potentially through increased MDTA 30% revenue, and potentially through the TRIP program from the state. The next slide just shows you the numbers overall. It's a 4.3% year-over-year increase in our operating budget, just shy of $1 million. As I mentioned, nearly all of that is personnel, benefits, uniforms, everything to support our staff. And just a little bit of that is non-personnel. Most of that relates to technology and telecommunications. I've covered it at a very high level. I'm very happy to answer any questions diving into the details anywhere. And this slide is again showing our timeline. As Josh was just discussing, we'll be presenting the final budget on May 12th to you, incorporating any changes that City Council may adopt to its support of DASH. Of course, you can choose to defer that to the June meeting. And then we're looking to launch the new DASH network about 2 months into fiscal 22 on September 5th.
We did have an agenda item from Martin regarding TDP outreach, but I think we covered that during the report earlier. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We just went ahead and covered that at the beginning of the meeting.
All right. So at this point, I'll ask if there's any further business to come before the board. If not, I'll announce that our next Board of Directors meeting is Wednesday, May 12th, 5:30 p.m. We anticipate still being virtual. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Matt.
Second.
Second, Ian. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a great evening. And just before we go, we will share the letter with all of you before it goes over to council, so you'll be aware of it when it's done. And I thank you again for your contributions to this.
All right. Bye-bye.